Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading in the evenings from a kind of abridged version of Valmiki Ramayana. It's actually some sections of, this is Krishna Dharma, is the compiler and the writer. And Prabhupada disciple from the UK. His writing style is really fantastic. He has drawn some sections from other Ramayanas, so it doesn't have a 100% match with Valmiki Ramayana, but it's nicely written. And we're at a section where Ram is now departing for the forest. All that scene of sorrow and he's heading for the forest. Sumantra's going to put him on the chariot and off they go. During the last discussion we had on this Valmiki Ramayana, there were a few questions, and some research has produced this little 2-page paper. One of the questions was, it came up a few times, is there some significance to the number 14 years of exile? So one source is a Sri Vaishnava scholar who has written on Ramayana, and his name is Narayanacharya. He explained as follows. I'm just going to read. This is, Mantra chose 14 years for Lord Ram's exile because the legal system of claiming proprietorship in Treta Yuga decreed that if the legal owner does not claim proprietorship for 14 years, then the resident of that place can claim it as his own. Mantra calculated that if Ram were to be away for 14 years, Bharata could legally claim ownership of Ayodhya. In Dwapara Yuga, the duration for claiming proprietorship was 13 years, which is why the Pandavas were exiled for 13 years. And in Kali Yuga, the present age, the same is 12 years. There's no Shastra Praman for this. Narayana Acharya is the Acharya who spoke it, so I can take it as, at least that's his understanding of the law of the time. Another Sri Vaishnava, I say Sri Vaishnava Acharyas because for Sri Vaishnavas, Ramayana is as important as the Bhagavatam is for the followers of Lord Chaitanya, worshippers of Krishna. Primarily worshippers of Krishna. I mean, there's Gaudiya Vaishnavas that are worshippers of Ramchandra also, but anyway. So Sri Vaishnava Acharya, another scholar, was consulted and said pretty much what it says in Valmiki Ramayana, that is, Mantra considered, Mantra giving advice to Kaikeyi, if he's gone for 14 years, then the citizens of Ayodhya will become accustomed to Bharat being the king. And then there's another logical explanation, which is in 14 years, because during that period of time, young men and young women would get married much earlier, 14 years means another generation will have passed. The younger generation won't have the same attachment to Ram that the current generation has. I mean, like Ram was married when he was 12. His father was anxious about his marriage when he was 12, which means Sita was younger. And we know from Valmiki Ramayana, there are many kings and princes that want to marry her. She wasn't even 12 yet. So it's, the culture was different. Then another question, this is what Uttama Bhakta asked a question. As Krishna left behind Bhagavad Gita, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left behind Shikshastaka, are there teachings that Ram left behind? And so the little research goes like this. Just like Bhagavad Gita is not exactly a book written by Krishna, it's part of Mahabharata. It's a section of Mahabharata towards the middle. And Krishna speaking to Arjuna is called Bhagavad Gita. Or in the Bhagavatam, Krishna speaking to Uddhava, so that's called Uddhava Gita. So similarly, in Valmiki Ramayana, there are some scholars that describe Sarga 56, I think. Ayodhya Khanda Sarga 100. So that's towards the end of Ayodhya Khanda, that's where Bharata has gone to Chitrakoot, and he's petitioning Ram to come back and rule Ayodhya. And Ram is speaking to Bharata about the qualities of a ruler, the qualities that he should rule by. So he's teaching him the qualities of being a good king by a question and answer. So some acharyas in Sri Vaishnava line identify that as Rama Gita. There are some other acharyas that identify that Sarga 100 from Ayodhya Khanda as Kachit Sarga, Kachit, what if? Kachit. So in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Prabhupada makes reference to Rama Gita from Skanda Purana. So Skanda Purana has a section where Rama is speaking and is known as Rama Gita. And similarly, within the Brahmanda Purana, there's a section about Lord Ramachandra. That section is known as the Adhyatma Ramayana, written by Vyas. And there's a section there consisting of 62 verses that's known as Rama Gita. And it's in the Uttara Khanda, Lakshman is very despondent about leaving Sita in the forest. He's supposed to take Sita to Valmiki's ashram. And he's taken her there, and so Rama Gita. So that's what the research came up with. So Pramanda Purana, Skanda Purana, Valmiki Ramayana, there are some sections where it's known, by some at least, it's Ram Gita. And it's very similar to Bhagavad Gita. It's not Krishna wrote a book, but Krishna spoke. Vyasadeva wrote it down. And so that's another question that some research came up with. And then there was a third question. This is just reporting to you in the room and people who are viewing online. A question came up in our last reading from Ramayana. It seems that Ram selectively latched onto the instruction of his father to go to the forest for 14 years and don't become the king, whereas there were other instructions that his father gave, and for that matter, instructions that Vishishta gave, that, why didn't he latch onto those? So there was a question, when Ram was departing, did Vishishta instruct Ram not to go to the forest? And the answer is no, he didn't instruct Ram to not go to the forest. What he did was he instructed Kaikeyi severely. When the forest garments were being placed on her by Ram because she didn't know how to wear them, Vishishta burst out and let Kaikeyi have it. So I'm going to read. This is straight from Valmiki Ramayana. This is Vishishta's words to Kaikeyi. Later, when they went to Chitrakoot, he is requesting, like everybody was requesting Ram to return in rural Ayodhya. But he selected that one out and selected just upholding the word of his father. Now, is that a Leela choice? Because the word of the preceptor and the word of his father, which gets greater weight? And Vishishta is not just like, a nice Brahmin. He's Brahma Rishi. He's very, very powerful. Very powerful. And Ram didn't comply. So let me just read. When Sita was first taking the bark cloth from the hands of Kaikeyi, the sage Vishishta, King Dasarath's guru, stopped her, speaking to Kaikeyi with tears in his eyes. "Oh, evil-minded Kaikeyi, you are the destroyer of this dynasty as you overstep all propriety. After deceiving the king, do you not yet remain within bounds? Princess Sita will not go to the forest. O woman devoid of good character, she will sit upon the throne on behalf of Ram. Wives are the very selves of their husbands, as Ram's very self. She will rule the earth. If Sita accompanies Ram to the forest, all of us here in the palace, as well as all the people of the city, will go with them. The palace guards will also go wherever Sita and Ram go. Indeed, the city and the whole nation will leave, bringing all their wealth and necessities, dressed in bark cloth like forest ascetics. Bharata and Shatrughna will also live in the wilderness like their elder brother Ram. You can rule this land devoid of people and overgrown with trees, vile as you are, and set on harming its people. Without Ram as king, the nation cannot survive, whereas the forest in which he will reside will become a nation." He's not done yet. "Bharata would not want to rule the kingdom if it were not willingly given by King Dasarath, nor would he choose to reside with you if he is actually born from King Dasarath. Even if you were to leap from the ground and fly in the sky, he would not act otherwise, knowing as he does the custom of our ancestors. As such, although you covet the welfare of your son Bharat, you have committed an act displeasing to him. There is no one in the world who is not devoted to Ram. This very day you will see, O Kaikeyi, how beasts, snakes, deer, birds, and even trees eagerly accompany Ram. Putting aside the bark cloth, give your daughter-in-law excellent jewelry, O queen. It is improper to make her wear bark cloth." In this way, Vishishta forbade Sita's wearing bark cloth. The sage continued, "O daughter of the king of Kayas, you only demanded the forced exile of Ram, not of Sita. Therefore, let Sita be always nicely decorated while she lives with Ram in the forest. Let the princess depart with proper conveyances and her principal maidservants, as well as befitting garments and all sorts of necessary paraphernalia. When you requested your boons, you never stipulated exile of Sita." So that's the Ramayana section, what Vishishta said. And Vishishta didn't instruct Ram. So now we're beginning how the author of this book, Krishna Dharma, has put it together. It's now part 2, called Exiled. And the chapter 1 of this section is called Into the Forest. After their father had returned, Ram and Lakshman left the city and went along country paths. So they're on the chariot, off they go. Dasarath stayed until he couldn't see the chariot dust anymore, went back to the palace. Ram and Lakshman left the city and went along the country paths toward the forest. Even though they urged Sumantra to drive quickly, a large number of citizens continued to follow them. Ram stopped to rest after some time and allowed the people to reach him. He said to them with affection, "You have shown your great love for me beyond any doubt. Now, for my pleasure, please bestow the same love upon my brother Bharata. I am sure he will take good care of you in every possible way. Although still a youth, he is old in wisdom and greatly heroic." Now he's old, he's still a youth. He's the same age as Ram, difference by a few hours. Any case? He is old in wisdom and greatly heroic. He will prove a worthy master and dispel all your sorrows and fears. Serve him well, for he has been selected by our Lord, the Emperor. It is also my desire that all of you please him with your service. Be kind to the Emperor, so that he may not suffer excessive agony in my absence. Ram tried hard to make the people turn back, but they would not return. The more Ram showed his determination to stick to the path of righteousness and truth, the more the people desired to have him as their ruler. It was as if Ram and Lakshman, by the cords of their virtuous qualities, had bound the people and were dragging them along. The chariot began to move forward again, and a group of elderly Brahmins, their heads shaking with age, ran behind, struggling to keep pace. As the chariot picked up speed, they called out, "Oh, swift steed, stop! Come back and be friendly to your master Ram, who is always intent on pleasing the Brahmins. Oh, horses, halt! Although endowed with excellent ears, do you not hear our plaintive cry? You should not bear Ram away. He is pure-minded, heroic, and virtuous. Therefore, you should return him to the city and be our king, not carry him away to some distant, lonely place." Ram looked back, feeling compassion for the distressed Brahmins. He did not want to ride himself while Brahmins walked, so he got down from the chariot and continued on foot. Although his heart was breaking to see the people's anguish, Ram looked straight ahead and walked with firm strides, followed by Sita and Lakshmana. Sumantra drove slowly behind them in the chariot. As the Brahmins continued to besiege them, they gradually approached the banks of the river Tamasa. Searching out a suitable site, they decided to camp there for the night. The citizens of Ayodhya camped nearby. Ram released the horses and allowed them to drink the clear, river water. After bathing, Ram spoke to Lakshman, indicating the forest across the water. There lie the desolate woods, my brother, echoing on all sides with the sounds of birds and beasts. The city of Ayodhya will similarly resound with the cries of forlorn men and women, lamenting for our having left. I fear for my father and mother, who must be weeping incessantly and will perhaps even lose their sight. Ram thought of Bharata. By now he would have been informed of the situation. Thinking of Bharata's nobility, Ram felt reassured as he spoke with Lakshman. I am sure the high-minded Bharata will take good care of our parents, consoling them in every way. As I reflect upon Bharata's soft-heartedness and piety, my mind is pacified. My dear Lakshmana, I am grateful you have chosen to follow me, for this too gives me solace. Fasting for this, our first night in the forest, in accord with scriptural codes, I shall now sleep peacefully. Lakshmana had Sumantra prepare a bed of leaves on the ground, and Ram lay upon that with Sita. He soon fell asleep, but Lakshmana stayed awake, guarding his brother. Nearby, he could see many fires lit by the people who were following Ram towards the forest. In the middle of the night, Ram rose and again spoke with his brother. It seems there is no possibility of us convincing the citizens to return to their homes, he said, looking across to the place where the people had set up camp. Just see the pains they are taking to follow us, sleeping now on the bare ground. Surely they would sooner give up their lives than go back to the city without us. Let us leave immediately while the people still sleep. They should not have to endure the austerity further on our behalf. As rulers of the people, it is our duty to eradicate our subjects' suffering. Certainly we should not cause them pain. Thus we must leave now and throw them off our trail. Lakshman agreed. And as Ram woke Sita, he roused Sumantra and had him prepare the chariot. The two princes and Sita climbed aboard, and Sumantra drove it swiftly upstream away from the sleeping people. The charioteer crossed a shallow part of the river and then, leaving the common road, drove through the woods. Doubling back and going by different paths, sometimes riding through shallow waters for some distance, Sumantra made sure the people would not be able to track them. He drove quickly, and before they had gone a considerable distance from where the citizens were camped. As dawn approached in the camp, the sound of numerous birds mingled with the lowing of the cows, which grazed freely on the river bank. Roused by these sounds, the citizens arose and soon discovered that Ram and his party had left. They were shocked and began to loudly lament. They condemned sleep for having stolen Ram from them. Falling to the ground, they wept and said, how could Ram, who is fit to rule the globe, put on the dress of an ascetic and leave for distant lands? How did that jewel among men who was like a loving father go to the forest, leaving us forlorn? Let us now meet our own end by fasting until death, or by setting out on the final great journey to the north. Looking all around, they found big logs for dry wood. Some of them suggested they pile up the wood and make a funeral pyre and immediately enter it. What is the use of life now? What could they say to their near and dear ones in Ayodhya when they asked of Ram's whereabouts? How could they say they let him enter the forest even as they slept? When they returned without Ram, the city would surely become desolate and devoid of all happiness. Having gone out of that high-souled hero, firmly determined to follow him anywhere, how could they now go back without him? Continuously crying out, the citizens sought out the chariot's tracks and began to follow them. When they found themselves thrown off the trail by Sumantra's expert driving, they became utterly despondent. Their anguished voices echoed around the woods. Now, Valmiki Ramayana has a different description of how he tricked them with the marks of the chariot, made it look like it was going back to Ayodhya. But anyway, that's okay, the detail. Alas, alas, what should we do? We're doomed by providence. Gradually, the bewildered citizens began to reluctantly head back to Ayodhya, following the tracks the chariot had made when leaving the previous day. Depressed and despairing, the citizens finally arrived in the city. They were blinded by grief and hardly able to distinguish between their own relatives and others. They searched for their homes with difficulty, some of them even entering the wrong houses. Afflicted with sorrow, they cast their eyes all around, and although the city and their houses were filled with abundant riches, to them it appeared vacant, and nothing gave them pleasure. Ayodhya seemed at that time to be like the firmament bereft of the moon. Firmament means like the sky, bereft of the moon. Everywhere its citizens shed tears, and all of them felt like giving up their lives. No one rejoiced on any occasion, even when coming upon unexpected fortune or seeing the birth of a firstborn son. Merchants did not display their merchandise, nor did the goods even seem attractive. Householders did not cook food, and the household deities were neglected. All the men returned home. As the men returned home without Ram, their wives reproached them. Without seeing Ram, what is the use of our house, children, and wealth? The wives said. It seems the only virtuous man in this world is Lakshmana, who has followed Ram to the forest in order to serve him. The men, pained by the loss of Ram, made no reply. Their wives lamented at length. How could they remain under the protection of the old king who had lost his good sense and sent Ram away? Worse still was the prospect of serving Kaikeyi, whose aim was now completely achieved. Having forsaken her husband and disgraced her family for the sake of power, who else would she not abandon? The ladies could not contain their feelings. Out of despair, they remonstrated with their husbands. Thanks to Kaikeyi, this kingdom will be ruined. With Ram gone, Dasarath will soon meet his end, along with his distinguished line, which has existed for so long. How can there be any good fortune with Kaikeyi in a position of power? We should therefore end our lives, or we should follow Ram to some distant place where Kaikeyi's name will never be heard. The glorious and ever truthful Ram shall be our only shelter. As the ladies of Ayodhya lamented, the sun gradually set on their city, leaving it dark and cheerless, its lights unlit, and its temples and public meeting places deserted. Fallen upon evil days, the celebrated city became silent. The sounds of singing, rejoicing, and instrumental music have ceased. All the people remained in their own homes, thinking only of Ram. He's a good writer. So then there's a break. During that night, the chariot carrying the princes covered a long distance. As they traveled, Ram remembered the pain of his relations and people. Reflecting again and again upon his father's command, he kept his determination strong and urged Sumantra to drive swiftly. They passed many villages, seeing on their outskirts well-tilled and cultivated fields, as well as beautiful blossoming woodlands. People from the villages, to where the news of Ram's exile had already spread, saw the chariot passing. And they censured the emperor and especially Kaikeyi, saying, "The cruel Kaikeyi has acted without propriety. She has caused the exile of the highly virtuous Ram. What will become of us now? How will the delicate princess Sita survive in the forest? How shameful that the king could abandon all affection for such a son and daughter-in-law." Going more slowly as he passed the people, Ram heard their comments, and he smiled at them without saying anything. As the chariot moved on, more swiftly, the travelers saw innumerable gardens, fruit orchards, and lotus ponds. Temples, resonant with the sounds of sacred incantations, were everywhere. While sitting in the chariot and enjoying the sight of his flourishing kingdom, Ram thought of his coming exile. He would long for the day of his return to the prosperous land of Koshala. As they at last reached Koshala's southern border, Ram got down from the chariot and stood facing the direction of Ayodhya. With his face covered in tears, he spoke in a choked voice, "I take leave of you, O foremost of cities, protected by the emperor and your presiding deities. May you fare well. When I have squared my debt to my father and fulfilled his pledge, I shall return." Many country dwellers had gathered around Ram. They were filled with grief to see him bid his sad farewell to Ayodhya. Ram glanced at them with affection. He thanked them for the love they showed for him and told them to go home. The people simply stood gazing at Ram, unable to move. Although he urged them to return home, they stood rooted to the spot. They could not turn away from the heroic and handsome prince. As they stood watching, Ram remounted his chariot and it disappeared into the distance, even as the sun sets at the end of the day. His writing is really good. Gradually, the party reached the Ganges River in the Ushinara province. Along the bank of the river, for as far as the eye could see, in both directions were clustered the hermitage of ascetics and rishis. Hundreds of hills ran along the length of the river, and the river flowed with cool water, flecked with white foam, making a roaring sound as it rushed past. Somewhere the river ran still and deep, and somewhere else it dashed violently against rocks. In places it was covered with white lotuses, while in others thousands of swans, cranes, and herons hovered on its waters. It was the resort of even gods and Gandharvas who sported along its banks. Surrounded by trees, laden with fruits and flowers, and full of varieties of singing birds, the river appeared most beautiful. Seeing this celestial region, Ram decided to stop for the night. He took shelter under the branches of a large tree and sat down to offer worship to the Ganges. Sumantra unyoked the horses and allowed them to drink and then roll on the grassy riverbank. The charioteer stood with folded hands near Ram, who sat peacefully with Sita by his side. The king of that territory was named, do you know the name? Guha, Guha, Guha. He's the ruler of humans that lived in the forest. Guha. The king of that territory was named Guha, a dear friend of Ram, who ruled over the tribal people known as the Nishadas. Nishadas, it's a name for tribal people. Kind of like uncivilized kind of people, Nishadas. Hearing from his people of Ram's presence, he immediately went to him. Guha found Ram by the bank of the Ganges, and he stood at a distance, waiting respectfully for his audience. He was overjoyed to find his friend and arrived in his kingdom. But his joy was mixed with sorrow at seeing him dressed as an ascetic. Ram looked up and saw Guha standing there, surrounded by his relations and elderly ministers. Quickly approaching him with Lakshman, he tightly embraced him and they exchanged greetings. Guha spoke to Ram, whom he had met on many occasions in Ayodhya when going there to pay tribute. meaning it's one of the things that subordinate kings would do to the emperor. They would go give tribute to the king, taxes, pay their taxes. I am honored by your presence in my kingdom. This land here is as much yours as it is mine. Indeed, I am your servant. Only order me, and I shall immediately do whatever you wish. He showed Ram the many varieties of food and drink he had brought, as well as the excellent beds he had prepared for them. Ram thanked him and said, I have been well honored by you today. You should know that I'm under a vow to live in the forest as an ascetic. I accept your offerings, but allow you to take them back. Please leave only as much as can be taken by my horses. Since these steeds are very dear to my father, you will please me by serving them well. Reluctantly, Guha commanded his men to do as Ram had requested, having the best food brought for the horses. He watched with sadness and admiration as Ram accepted only water for himself, and they lay down to sleep on a bed of leaves. Lakshman washed Ram's feet and again kept vigil nearby. Going over to Lakshman, Guha said, Here is a bed for you. There is no need to remain awake, for I shall stand here, bow in hand, and guard you from all danger. And guard you all from danger. There's nothing in these woods unknown to me. Indeed, along with my men, I could withstand the attack of a vast and powerful army coming upon this region. Guha took Lakshman up by the arm and showed him to the bed, but Lakshman politely refused his offer. Under your protection, we feel not even the least fear, O sinless Guha, but how can I rest while Ram and Sita lie down on the earth? Lakshman looked at his brother lying beneath the tree. His mind was troubled. How could one such as Ram, who is capable of withstanding even the gods in battle, be brought to such a state? Lakshmana's thoughts drifted to Ayodhya. He became restless, thinking of his father and the subject. Surely Dasarath would soon breathe his last, having sent his dearest son to a life of severe austerity. Probably Koshali and the king would die that very night, uttering words of despair and anguish. Losing their beloved monarch, after watching Ram depart, the people of Ayodhya would be seized with agony after agony. Engrossed in such thoughts, Lakshman breathed heavily, like an infuriated serpent. Hot tears glided down his face. Guha placed an arm around his shoulder and gently reassured him. As the two men spoke, the night gradually slipped away. When dawn broke, Guha arranged for a large rowboat to ferry the princes across the fast-flowing Ganges. The time had arrived to leave the chariot and continue on foot. As the princes fastened on their armor and weapons, Sumantra humbly approached them with joined palms and asked for instructions. Ram smiled and said, You have rendered me excellent services, O Sumantra. Please return now to the king's presence and inform him of our well-being. We shall now proceed on foot. Sumantra found it difficult to leave Ram. Gazing into his face, he spoke in an anguished voice. What man in this world has ever had to face such a perverse destiny, O Raghava? What is the value of cultivating piety and truth when we see such a result? We are actually lost and ruined by your departure. Coming under the control of the sinful Kaikeyi, we will simply suffer. Sumantra broke down and wept for some time, and Ram comforted him. As he regained his composure, Ram said, I cannot think of anyone who is as great a friend to our family as you, O noble charioteer. Please act in a way which will not increase my father's grief. Whatever he instructs should be carried out without hesitation, even if he orders you to serve Kaikeyi. Whoa. Ram understood all the nuances of statecraft. He was worried that in his absence, the king's ministers and servants might try to undermine Kaikeyi. He wanted the kingdom to run smoothly and his father to be spared of any unnecessary anxiety in dealing with intrigues. He wanted also to ensure that his family not be left anxious for his sake. Ram added, "Please tell my father that neither Lakshman nor Sita nor I are grieving in any way. Happily do we commence our sojourn in the woods. The period of 14 years will soon pass, and we shall return." Ram considered the urgent need to reestablish stability in Ayodhya. He spoke solemnly to Sumantra, asked the king to fetch Bharata quickly and duly install him as Prince Regent. Bharata himself should be told to accept the post without any hesitation, for this will be most pleasing to me. He should then serve the king and all the queens with an equally disposed mind. Ram gave his permission for Sumantra to leave, but the charioteer stood still before him, his mind perplexed. How could he return without Ram? He revealed his mind to Ram. As we left the city, the people were practically rendered senseless with grief, even upon seeing you in this chariot. Then what will be their state when they see the chariot returning empty? Surely Ayodhya will be torn in two, even as the army of a hero is split apart when he sees his chariot carrying only the charioteer, the hero having been slain. It's really heavy just reading this. Sumantra thought of Dasarath and Kaushalya. They would be devastated by grief when they heard that their son had actually entered the forest. Sumantra felt incapable of returning. He pleaded with Ram to let him go to the forest also. He was prepared to remain with Ram for the full 14 years rather than go back to Ayodhya without him. Falling to the ground and clasping Ram's feet, he spoke with pain in his voice. My desire is to convey you back to Ayodhya at the end of your exile. If I must return without you, then seated upon the chariot, I shall enter blazing fire. I am your devoted servant. It does not befit you to abandon me now. Let me follow you and render you every service. 14 years will be so many moments in your presence, while your absence will seem like 14 ages. Ram was moved by compassion for Sumantra, who was piteously supplicating him again and again. He lifted the weeping charioteer. I know your devotion for me, Sumantra. However, I must ask you to return. Kaikeyi will not be satisfied unless she sees the chariot return without me and hears from you of my entry into the forest. For the good of the king, I want her to be convinced that I have fulfilled the terms of her boons, and I also desire that her son Bharat be given the kingdom. Ram knew that if any doubt remained about whether or not he had really gone to the forest, then, in hope of his return, they would not install his brother Bharat. He therefore convinced Sumantra of the need for him to return to Ayodhya, carrying the messages he had given. With a heavy heart, Sumantra finally assented and got up on the chariot. Ram then turned and spoke to Guha. It would not be proper for me to stay in a region where I have many men to serve me. I wish to go to some uninhabited part of the forest and live in a simple hermitage, gathering my daily food from wild roots and fruits. Ram knew Guha and his people were hoping to accommodate him in a nearby wood, but he was devoted to virtue and wanted to properly follow the scriptural instructions which prescribed a life of strict asceticism for one taking a vow of living in a forest. He using the sap of a banyan tree, Rama and Lakshman matted their hair into a thick mass. With their matted locks and their bark grass garments, the two princes looked like a couple of ascetic rishis. Ram helped Sita onto the boat and then jumped aboard himself along with Lakshman. Headed by Guha, the oarman plied the boat across the river. Ram waved to Sumantra, who stood motionless on the sandy river bank, gripped by despondency. The boat approached the southern shore of the Ganges swiftly and smoothly. Sita folded her palms and prayed to the goddess Ganga for protection in the forest. The river was placid and shone like a sheet of glass under the bright sun. Small ripples spread from the side of the boat as the oars gently and rhythmically splashed the water. Ram and Lakshman sat silently, thinking of Ayodhya and their family and friends. They watched as Sita sat in the prow of the boat. Prow is the front. Bow, prow. Her eyes closed in prayer. Gradually, they approached the shoreline with its sprawling forest reaching practically to the river's edge. After the party disembarked, Ram said a fond farewell to Guha. He embraced the forest chieftain and then returned and walked into the thick forest. Lakshman went ahead of him, placing Sita between them. As they walked, they heard the sounds of beasts and birds, the shrill trills of parrots, the grunts of boars, the cries of monkeys, and the occasional growls and roars of tigers. Ram was apprehensive about Sita's safety. The vast and trackless forest lay immediately ahead. What dangers would they now have to face? But as they began to penetrate into the forest, Ram's fear for Sita gave way to delight. At last, the moment had arrived. His father's word would now be redeemed. Despite any danger, he would surely stay here for 14 years, thinking only of the glory of his aged and pious father. Keeping his mind fully alert, Ram gripped the great bow which hung from his shoulder and placed his other hand on the hilt of his blue steel sword strapped to his belt. The three travelers had become hungry, and they searched for roots and bulbs fit for offering in the sacred fire. After they had cooked and made the offering, they ate, and when the meal was over, they performed their evening worship. Ram and Lakshman then sat together, and Ram spoke a little to his brother. Surely the king will sleep only fitfully tonight, O Lakshman. On the other hand, Kaikeyi will rest peacefully with her desired objective fulfilled. Ram was pensive. Up until now, he had not dwelt upon his anxiety for fear of increasing the pain of those he loved. Now that he was finally in solitude in the forest, he felt a deep disquiet. What other terrible suffering would Kaikeyi cause for his father? With Bharat installed as Prince Regent, perhaps she would even try to bring about Dasaratha's death so that her own son might more quickly become the king. How could the king protect himself, being weakened by grief? What would become of his mother, Kaushalya, as well as Sumitra? Ram appeared anxious as he continued. I think that in the morning you should return to Ayodhya, O noble prince. Protect our mothers and our aged father. I do not see anyone else who can guard against Kaikeyi's evil intrigues. Even now she may be plotting to poison our parents. Although he felt helpless, Ram nevertheless censured himself for failing to secure his parents' happiness. Having undergone great pains to nurture him with love, they were deprived of his company just when they should have found their labors repaid. Alas, exclaimed Ram, I am an ungrateful and useless son. Ram wept. He could by no means breach the order of Kaikeyi and his father, but he feared he might be acting wrongly if the result was his parents' death. Torn apart by his feelings, he wanted Lakshman to go back to Ayodhya to protect them. Now, is that in Valmiki Ramayana? You're not sure? Can you send me take notes if this topic, I'll ask our scholars and see. Ram lamented loudly for some time. When he fell silent, Lakshman replied, "Please do not grieve in this way, dear brother. As you simply cause grief for myself and Sita, it is not possible for me to leave you, as I would not survive even for a short while in your absence. Placing your faith in the pious Bharata, you should not send me away. I only wish to remain with you here and do not desire even the highest heaven without you." Ram remained silent. He knew well that Lakshman would never leave him. It had grown dark, and the brothers sought the shelter of a large tree where Ram and Sita lay down to rest. Lakshmana remained awake a short distance away, vigilantly guarding them from any danger. Gradually the full moon rose and shone through the branches of the high trees, illuminating the beautiful faces of Ram and Sita as they slept, which appeared to Lakshman like two more moons fallen to the earth. The following morning, after sunrise, they went in an easterly direction toward the confluence of the Ganges and the Jamuna. They were keen to find the hermitage of the rishis, whom they knew lived in that region. The famous Bharadwaj, the leader of all the Brahmins inhabiting that forest, dwelt nearby. As they walked, they were enraptured by the colorful beauty of the forest. Huge trees rose up on all sides. In some places, the trees opened up into expansive clearings, carpeted by innumerable varieties of flowers and shrubs. Lakes of crystal clear water covered with white, blue, and reddish lotuses were seen here and there. The trees were laden with blossoms, filling the air with their fragrance. The sound of cuckoos, parrots, and peacocks echoed all around. Keeping close together, the three travelers walked throughout the day, sometimes moving easily and at other times with difficulty through densely wooded regions. Toward the end of the afternoon, they heard in the distance the sound of the two rivers rushing to meet each other. Around them, they began seeing signs of life: chopped wood and man-made paths. Catching sight of smoke rising above the trees, they realized they had found the dwellings of the rishis, and they quickly went forward toward them. At the precincts of the hermitage, they were greeted by a young ascetic who was a disciple of Bharadwaj. He led them through the many thatched cottages of the Brahmin community, showing them to a great sacrificial arena where Bharadwaj was seated, surrounded by his disciples. The sage sat before the sacred fire, absorbed in meditation. As soon as the three travelers caught sight of the effulgent rishi, they prostrated themselves on the earth in obeisances. They waited respectfully at a distance for the sage to beckon to them. Bharadwaj had attained virtual omniscience by his long practice of asceticism and meditation. He immediately sensed the presence of his exalted guests, and he rose up to greet them. Going before the sage, Ram said with joined palms, "We are Ram and Lakshman, the sons of Emperor Dasarath. O highly venerable sage, here's my blessed and irreproachable wife, a princess of Videha and the daughter of King Janaka. Ordered by my ever pious father, I've come to this forest to live the life of an ascetic for 14 years, and my brother and wife have chosen to follow me. Please bless us." Bharadwaj gazed upon the faces of his guests, understanding their divine identities. He offered them various delicious foods prepared from wild roots and fruits. Tears flowed from his eyes as he spoke to Ram. I already knew of your exile and have been expecting you to pass this way. Your auspicious arrival here at my hermitage signals the success of all my austerities and sacrifices. It is highly difficult to have sight of you, and today I am supremely blessed. My dear Ram, if you so desire, you may remain here in this delightful stretch of land, which is quite suitable for the life of asceticism. Smiling and graciously accepting the sage's offering of love, Ram replied, this hermitage is well known and not so far from the state of Ayodhya. The people will soon seek me out if I remain here. Please tell me of some other, more lonely place, for I will not be able to tolerate the pain of the people again beseeching me to return. Bharadwaj understood Ram's concern. He directed the prince to a mountain named Chitrakoot. Have you been there? Yes. Huh? It's a mountain. It's really nice. It's unspoiled. It's not like commercial or anything. It's very, very simple. Lying some 50 miles away, after spending the night at the sage's hermitage, the three travelers set out the next morning toward the mountain. It lay across the Jamuna, which they crossed by means of a raft constructed from timber and bamboo. As they walked towards Chitrakoot, they saw countless varieties of trees and plants spreading everywhere in tableaus of rich colors. The constant singing of thousands of birds resounded on all sides, mingling with the sounds of trickling rivulets and cascading waterfalls. From time to time, the trumpeting of an elephant could be heard in the distance. Branches of great trees were bent low under the burden of sweet fruits. From many of them hung large honeycombs, heavy with the thick honey produced by the black bees droning around the fragrant forest flowers. It's like there's picture after picture after picture. It's really good, really good. Sita was captivated by the beauty of the forest, touching and smelling the many blossoms that hung all around. Completely forgetting his grief and anxiety, Ram laughingly held her hand and told her all the names of the trees and plants. The three travelers were elated simply to see the celestial region. In great happiness, they moved toward Chitrakoot. The part of the forest leading to Chitrakoot had been rendered quite passable due to regular traffic of ascetics, and the travelers made good progress. Toward the end of the third day of their departure from Bharadwaj's hermitage, they approached the foot of the mountain. They saw there a huge banyan tree which spread its branches of dark green leaves away in all directions. Bowing down to the presiding deity of the tree, Sita offered her respects. She prayed that they would successfully complete their exile and return that way again. On the way back to Ayodhya, Lakshmana prepared beds of leaves near the foot of the tree. After saying their evening prayers and preparing a meal, the travelers rested for the night. At sunrise the following day, Ram and his party moved on again, with the great Chitrakoot mountain rising ahead of them. Bluish in color, it was covered with corpses of green, yellow, and red trees. Not corpses, C-O-P-S-E-S, copses. Clusters, I guess. Numerous waterfalls sparkled in the morning sun. The mountain was sheer in places, smoothly sloping elsewhere. Its snow-covered peaks disappeared into the clouds. The travelers stopped and stared for some time at its majestic beauty. They began to ascend the mountain, and some way up its side arrived at the hermitage of the sage Valmiki, situated on a broad plateau. The sage was joyful to see Ram and his companions. He greeted them with hospitality and respect, and they conversed for some time. Valmiki told them of his own history. Although he was now a powerful ascetic, blazing with bodily luster, he had previously been a robber who had maintained his large family by plundering travelers. The rishi told the whole story. Once, long ago, he encountered the sage Narada in the forest and sought to steal from him. The sage told Valmiki he would happily give him anything he wanted, but he told him to first go to his family and ask them the following question: are you prepared to accept a share of the sins which will ensure from my crimes? Valmiki assented to this request and went to his family. However, they declined to accept his sins, saying that they only wished to receive from him the fruits of his action in the form of money and goods. Leaving them in disgust, Valmiki returned to the sage, who then told him to renounce his life of crime and become an ascetic. In order to bring about in Valmiki a full sense of temporality of life, Narada told him to meditate on the word Mara, meaning death. Valmiki thus constantly repeated the word Mara without realizing that he was in effect also repeating the name of Rama. By his meditation, he became a powerful rishi. Rama decided to stay close to Valmiki's hermitage, and he asked Lakshmana to construct a cottage. Lakshmana quickly erected a timber-walled hut with a thatched roof. Ram lit a fire, and with roots gathered from nearby and cooked in that fire, he made offerings to the gods. He prayed to the Lokapalas, that's the protectors of the directions. Loka, Pala means protect. The principal deities who guard the universal quarters, asking them to sanctify and protect the dwelling. Then he entered it along with Sita. Within that spacious two-roomed hut, Ram constructed an altar for the worship of Vishnu in accord with the instructions of Scripture, rejoicing at having found such a delightful place for the residence. The three travelers settled down in peace. And that's the end of chapter 1. Coming attractions is what happens when Sumantra returns back to Ayodhya in an empty chariot and bringing Bharata and all of that.
So I just checked the Valmiki Ramayana, and it does say that Ram tried to send Lakshmana back.
Okay.
It does confirm.
Okay.
Ayodhya Kanda Sarga 53.
53. Wow. You have an English translation or Hindi?
English.
English. Good for you. Okay. Sarga 53. Well, because Ram Navami is coming in just 2 days, it seems, as we're getting closer, it seems more and more fitting to hear Ramayana. There's the sad parts, and there's the happy parts, and there's throughout, whether it's sad or happy, it's the virtue of Ram and how he withstands at anything and everything in order to fulfill that principle of virtue. The way that this is written, it describes very human feelings. To Ram, very human feelings and contemplations and everything. I'm not familiar enough with Valmiki Ramayana to know if that's also Like maybe you could look that up while we're sitting here. When he's going through this thing of feeling very sad, and in that same section, in his contemplations, you should go back, and because it sounds very, very human. I mean, the way that Krishna from the Bhagavatam, the way that Krishna experiences emotion is seemingly worldly, but the way that it's written, at least, and our acharyas help us understand it, it's transcendental emotion that looks like a material emotion. His main business, Krishna's main business, is stimulating the love of his devotees. So he does different things that seem human-like or worldly, but the purpose is stimulating the love of his devotees. I'm not familiar enough with Ramayana to say, how Valmiki Ramayana to say, is it similar? Plus, it's worth noting that while the Bhagavatam has its story, the richness of the story is brought out largely by Lord Chaitanya's followers, because Lord Chaitanya and his followers, make a lot of emphasis on rasa, or the mellows of loving exchange. And that's not as clear. It's clear, but it's not as clear. The whole science of rasa is developed in its complete form by Rupa Goswami under the instruction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to develop it, teaching it, and then researching it and developing it. Just historically, I learned this from, if Sanchari is listening, she can send in a question or two. But Sanchari, one of our devotees here, took Bharatanatyam dance from a classical dance teacher from the time she was a little girl, like your daughter's age, for her whole childhood and into young teenage life. And the teacher that she studied under was very learned in the writings of the guru who taught the science of rasa. And I can't remember his name right now. Do you remember his name? Something. So that person, whose name I can't remember, had a different number of rasas than what Rupa Goswami writes. Rupa Goswami expanded it by his knowledge of the scripture and his realization and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, the primary and secondary rasas, without going into the detail, because I had looked at it at some time, but I can't remember the detail right now. So that was around shortly, as far as the Christian calendar, shortly after Christ. So long after Krishna appeared, but the art of dance and the science of rasa was developed by this particular sage. And then many generations, decades, centuries passed when Lord Chaitanya appeared, and then Lord Chaitanya gave teachings on rasa, and he gave that to Rupa Goswami to develop, and he expanded. But the writings about rasa are really profound. I mean, details and details and details found in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which Prabhupada has translated into English, a summary study of it, and then further expanded into a sequel literature, Ujjvala Nilamani. Because even in material life, there's emotion. And there's different kinds of emotion or different things that stimulate those different kinds of emotion. There's a science of emotion or rasa. And then there's ways to elevate that to transcendental rasa, which this is a reflection of. The true rasa is in the spiritual realm. The taste and the emotions and in relationships and activities and speech and so forth is a reflection of the spiritual world of rasa. And it's elaborately explained. And how to understand the passages of Srimad Bhagavatam in terms of that rasa is elaborately explained. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, at least my familiarity is more with Srimad Bhagavatam, that science of rasa is very, very, very well established. It's not that Rupa Goswami didn't write anything about other forms of the Lord, but rasa is particularly acute, and the object of rasa is Krishna in the Bhagavatam. Now, these other rasas that we're reading about, these rasas of sorrow, for example, it's described in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It doesn't get the same attention as the sorrow that the residents of Vrindavan felt when Krishna left Vrindavan to go to Mathura and all of those things. But the emphasis, my point is this, the emphasis in Lord Chaitanya and his followers is upon rasa and less so prior to that. So there's lots and lots and lots. Just reading, and we're not refined persons, just reading Ramayana, it stimulates feelings naturally. And one of the feelings that it stimulates is this great admiration for Ram as being such a noble person, such a virtuous person, such an upstanding person, so fixed in virtue. So that by reading like that, it has an effect of lifting that sense in the reader. It helps to create within society that is attentive to the message of Ramayana, to be a society that's one that's symptomized by virtue, more so than the opposite, and being very clear the difference between the two, and how to deal with people like KK in a virtuous way. Because it happens in life that people do mean things. And how does a virtuous person respond to people who do mean things? Well, if you don't have virtue, you're like an animal, you just snarl back or whatever you do. You defend and protect. So how does a virtuous person defend and protect? It gives an aura, a sense of culture, spiritual culture in a worldly society by Ram, the ideal king. It's nice. Ramayana is a very nice transcendental literature to hear and recite and remember. So let's see if there's some discussion.
Sanchari commented actually that it was the sage Bharata Muni.
You want to take the microphone?
So Sanchari
Bharata Muni.
Bharata Muni.
Thank you. She sent in a text message. Thank you, Sanchari, for that. Bharata Muni. And send in the message of what was the year of his life when he lived and wrote the things he wrote. Send that text message in also. Bharata Muni. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Anything? Over here. Oh, you came prepared. Good for you.
So I was just following the geography of the area while you were explaining how.
You're looking in your phone?
No. I was just following.
In your mind.
In my mind, because I am from that area.
You're from that area,
From Kanpur.
from Kanpur.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was just following, and what we learned, what I understand that.
Is the microphone on?
Yeah, it's on. Okay.
Okay.
That. Okay. Yeah.
Like ice cream,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay. So Sage Valmiki's ashram was in Bithur, which is close to Kanpur.
Bittur is close to Kanpur.
Yeah, and that's where Sage Valmiki's ashram was.
In Bittur.
Yeah, but here I just learned that his ashram was in Chitrakoot, so probably he moved from there when. So
He had several. My understanding is there are several places. There might two things. He had several places, not only one. And the second is different people say this is the ashram of Valmiki, and that's the ashram of Valmiki, and that's the ashram of Valmiki, and that's the ashram of Valmiki. It's fundraising. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's pretty far apart from Bithur to
Oh,
Chitrakoot.
when we went to Dwarka, we visited a place that they said, this is the cave where Muchukunda stayed. In Dwarka? It was a cave. It was the whole big thing. They had their hundi box and the whole thing. But you know, it's that's not where the cave of Muchukunda is. You get the idea?
It's just so it's either so it's not certain. Either it's not certain, or basically he moved.
It would take somebody that's very scholarly and has done lots of research and cross-referenced this and that to be able to answer your question. I went to that trouble when when we visited the place that they said, this is the cave of Muchukunda. So I said, no. But so where is the cave of Muchukunda? Where is the cave of Muchukunda? There is a place. It's near the border of UP and Rajasthan, and it's in Rajasthan. And there's a mountain where there's a cave, and it's, you know, at least as far as I can understand, that's what our acharyas have confirmed. That's where the place is, but it's not in Dwarka. Sorry. So, you know, where is it? Because he ran and he ran and he ran. Krishna ran and Kalyavana chased him. So where'd they end up? Where's that Muchukunda cave? So it would take somebody, you can do it if you want, you know, what I recall is there are multiple places where Valmiki had ashrams. You know, where Love and Kush were born, for example. He had many different ashrams, more than one at least. So which is which, and you'd have to, you can do a PhD thesis on it, and, you know, write a paper for Back to Godhead magazine or something, because there's probably something like there's multiple. Okay, so which is which? Don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything back here?
At what age Ram went to?
Because we have about 45.
Very silly question.
It's okay. It's okay.
At what age Ram went to the forest?
Okay. He was 12 when he was married, and we read the other day, he was in Ayodhya for something like 15 years. Do you recall the number? Do you recall that? Something like that.
So how long Ram lived? Like for Krishna, it says like
125 years.
Yeah, and Ram?
He ruled for a long time. You want to know how many years he ruled for?
Just not ruled, but lived. Yeah.
Well, when he lived, he ruled for as long as he lived. He ruled,
Okay.
because, 14 years plus 12 plus 15, that's when he came back. Something like that, for around in his early 40s, something like that. And then how long he ruled for, I don't recall, some number of thousand years, whatever that number was, because it's a different age. Dorpayug. Send me a little note that I'll research and how long he lived, how long he ruled, when was it, at what point in time did he leave after his appearance?
I was just comparing with Krishna and Ram.
Yeah, it's a different age, different yuga. I'll research and, tomorrow evening we'll present the results of the research.
I know you have mentioned in the previous classes. I mean, it's all Rama's Leela in terms of why he left all his the people that were dependent on him.
Yes.
But I mean, it's still kind of feels that, I mean, because to
One thing, so many people have to suffer.
right.
Not
Because-
fair.
Yeah. Because he was an ideal king, an ideal person.
So an ideal person is going to look after the people that are dependent upon him.
Yeah.
Well, three answers. One is Leela. The second is they were protected by Bharata. And as the omniscient Lord, he knew they would be protected by Bharata. They wouldn't be bereft of a protector. Bharata protected them. And a third is love and separation. And for there to be love and separation, there has to be separation. So it's another way of saying Leela, but it's love and separation, intensifying their love. Gosh, how much their love for him was intensified. So when there's meeting, love is intensified by meeting. But when there's separation, it's intensified even more. It's a science of rasa. Now, to go along with this, there's multiple explanations of the misfortune of Sita as well. Anyway, that's another story. But there's worldly and there's transcendental explanations of what Sita had to endure. Online? Couple.
So Sanchari wanted to
Not just the part where you hold, but the part that you speak into. Yeah, exactly, because that's where it goes near your mouth, not where your hand is. Okay.
So Sanchari commented, a quick answer would be that Bharata Muni was dated somewhere around 500 BCE to 500 CE. The Natya Ashtra was also composed during that time period, varying date between 200 BCE and 200 CE.
So read it slower again because you read real fast. Slow and loud.
A quick answer would be that Bharata Muni was dated somewhere from 500 BCE to 500 CE. The Natya Ashtra was also composed during that time period.
That's his writing.
Yeah.
So and actually it's composed during his lifetime because it was same
Somewhere around
period.
200
So 500 before Christ, 500 after Christ, sometime in that, around Christ's time. Okay,
And she said she can ask her teacher to know if she knows.
more detailed.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you can send that to us if you like.
Also, regarding Mataji's question, a devotee commented that Ramachandra ruled for around 11,000 years.
11,000 years, there you go. 11,000 plus 41.
We have a question from Girivaradari Das. how to understand people of Ayodhya who showed so much love in separation. Some people are responsible to send, same people are responsible to send Mother Sita to forest.
Do you understand the question? I don't.
The same people who are responsible to send Mother Sita to
Forest, how can they have a love separation, a mood of separation?
The people who sent her to the forest. Who sent her to the forest? No, Kaikeyi didn't send her to the forest. Nobody sent her to the forest. She wanted to go. Does that answer the question? I don't understand the question, but does that answer the question?
but the people who blamed her in that
People blame Sita? No, they didn't blame Sita. She wanted to go. They blame Ram. Why'd you let your wife go? She shouldn't have put her to that and exposed her to that.
Vashishta advised
Yeah,
Ram not to
and others said, how can yes anyway. Next.
So this question is sent in by Sanchari, but was asked by someone else.
Okay.
How do we understand Valmiki being a part of Valmiki Ramayana itself?
Why not? Because he was a contemporary, so he's a personality in the life of Ram because he's a personality in the life of Ram. No problem.
And a follow-up to that question is that he's explaining his own history to Rama while his history is still unfolding.
Yeah. Why not? I mean, if I was going to write a book, I probably wouldn't put myself in the book, even if I was contemporary. But this is Lord Ram, and Valmiki is such an integral part of the life of Lord Ram. So he's in the description, and he's giving his past, as far as I understand from what we just read, at least, he's giving his past history. So you could tell somebody, this is how I came to Krishna consciousness, or something like that. Or this was what it was like during my college days, or something like that. He's just giving some history. That's it. Anything else? Okay.
In fact,
Microphone.
in fact, there is I heard a story. I don't know if it's from Valmiki Ramayana. I have to verify. But so after Valmiki wrote up to Lord Ramachandra coming back to Ayodhya after killing Ravana, and he was narrating that the Ramayana up to that point to his disciples, and the disciples said, "Oh, this is so sweet story. I hope there is more to add to this." And that's when Valmiki, he wanted to kind of that story to be end on a high note, but then the vision comes to him that in the future there is going to be more things happening when Sita has to be sent to the forest again after the birth of Lavakusha and so forth. So
It sounds interesting. I'm reluctant to place much confidence in something that I heard somebody said, blah, blah, blah. I'm reluctant to go there.
there was actually a famous movie made in
Well, a famous movie is all the reason to say is probably not true.
There was another comment made
Okay.
by Manmat Panda. He said, Maharaj, I think the last question was regarding Mother Sita's banishment by Lord Rama a second time.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. And there's a lot to say about that. And why would he, et cetera, et cetera. And why did she, and what about the citizens? And all that. Your daughter have anything? No.
She likes Rama and Sita, so she's very fortunate that she's listening to this.
Okay. Very good. He's a good writer, isn't he? This devotee. And some of the language he uses is British. It's not so much familiar, at least for me, some of the terminology. You have to get a British dictionary to look it up and see what it means. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.